Precious Fred stood frozen in the doorway of the James mansion, watching 3 6-year-old boys turn the elegant living room into a war zone. Paint was splattered across the white walls, expensive furniture was overturned, and feathers from torn pillows floated through the air like snow. But what shocked her most wasn't the destruction. It was the pain in their eyes. "You can't make us like you," screamed Tommy, the oldest triplet, hurling a toy truck at her feet. "We don't want another nanny. We want our mama." His brothers, Dan and Ben James, stood behind him like soldiers ready for battle. Their little faces were streaked with tears and dirt. They had driven away 16 nannies in 5 months, and they were determined to make Precious number 17. As Precious looked at these heartbroken children, she didn't see monsters. She saw 3 little boys drowning in grief and terror, desperately trying to protect themselves from being hurt again. "I know you miss your mama," Precious said softly, stepping carefully over the broken toys scattered across the floor. "And I'm not here to replace her. I'm here because I think you need someone who understands what it feels like when your world falls apart." The boys stopped throwing things, surprised by her gentle words. No nanny had ever talked to them like this before. Tommy stared at her with suspicious eyes. "You don't know anything about us." Precious knelt down to their eye level. "You're right. I don't know everything about you yet, but I know that you're scared. I know that you're angry. And I know that you think if you're mean enough to me, I'll leave just like all the others did." The 3 boys exchanged glances, clearly not expecting this response. "But here's the thing," Precious continued with a small smile. "I'm not going anywhere, and by the end of today, I'm going to show you something that will change everything." Tommy's eyes narrowed. "What?" Precious stood up, brushing feathers off her dress. "I'm going to show you that it's okay to let someone new care about you, even when your heart is broken." Just then, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed from the hallway, and the boys' faces went pale with fear. "He's coming," Dan whispered. "Daddy's going to be so mad about the mess." But what happened next would shock everyone in that house, including the man who had spent 5 months believing his sons were impossible to reach. 5 months earlier, on June 12, 2024, Phillips James sat in his corner office on the 42nd floor of James Industries, staring at his phone as it rang for the 3rd time that morning. He knew it was either his assistant with another nanny crisis or the boys' school with another incident report. He was right. It was both. "Mr. James," his assistant Joy said when he finally answered, "I have bad news and worse news." Phillips rubbed his temples, feeling the familiar headache starting. "Give me the bad news first." The school called. The boys started a food fight in the cafeteria, locked their teacher in the supply closet, and refused to come out of the playground tunnel when it was time for class. Phillips sighed deeply. "And the worst news? Nanny number 16 just quit." Mrs. Roller said, and I quote, "Those children are possessed by demons, and no amount of money is worth risking my sanity." Phillips felt like his world was crumbling. 5 months ago, he had been a successful businessman with a beautiful wife and 3 happy children. Now Gloria was gone, killed in a car accident that had shattered their family. And Phillips was drowning, trying to be both father and mother to 3 heartbroken boys who seemed determined to destroy everything around them. "Joy, call the nanny agency. Tell them we need someone immediately." "Sir, I already did. They said they're out of candidates. Word has gotten around about the boys, and no one wants to work for the James family anymore." Phillips stared out his office window at the city below. He was worth over $1.8 billion, but all his money couldn't solve the most important problem in his life. His sons were falling apart, and he didn't know how to put them back together. At 34, Phillips had built an empire from nothing. He was brilliant, determined, and had never met a problem he couldn't solve. But grief had changed his boys into strangers, and Phillips felt helpless watching them spiral into anger and destruction. The truth was, Phillips was struggling with his own grief. Gloria had been his best friend, his partner, and the heart of their family. Without her, Phillips felt lost and overwhelmed. He worked longer hours because it was easier than facing the empty house and his son's accusing eyes. The boys blamed him for their mother's death, though they never said it out loud. Gloria had been driving to pick up a surprise gift for Philip's birthday when the accident happened. The guilt was eating Phillips alive, and he knew his sons felt it too. "Sir," Joy's voice brought him back to reality. "What should I do about finding a new nanny?" Phillips thought for a moment. "Post an ad online. Offer triple the usual salary. Someone out there must be desperate enough to work with my sons." But Phillips had no idea that the person who would answer his ad would change all their lives forever. On June 15, 2024, 29-year-old Precious Fred sat in her tiny apartment, scrolling through job listings on her laptop while rain drummed against her window. She had been out of work for 3 months, ever since the family she worked for had moved to another country. Precious had been a nanny for 7 years, and she loved working with children. But lately, the job market had been tough, and families wanted younger nannies with fancy degrees and perfect references. What families didn't see in Precious' resume was her special gift. She understood pain. Precious had grown up in foster care after her parents died in a house fire when she was 8 years old. She had been passed from home to home, never staying anywhere long enough to feel safe or loved. By the time she aged out of the system at 18, Precious had learned to recognize the signs of a child in emotional pain. She had also learned that sometimes the children who acted the worst were the ones who needed love the most. When Precious saw Phillips James' job posting, she almost scrolled past it. The description was intimidating: seeking experienced nanny for 3 energetic boys. Previous nannies have found the position challenging. Competitive salary for the right candidate. But something in the carefully chosen words made Precious pause. Previous nannies have found the position challenging. That was rich people speak for, "Our kids are out of control and we're desperate." Precious did some research on the James family and found the story that changed everything. 5 months ago, Gloria James had died in a car accident, leaving behind her husband and 6-year-old triplets. Precious' heart ached as she read the news articles. She knew exactly what those boys were going through because she had lived it herself. The fear, the anger, the desperate need to push people away before they could leave you too. "Those boys don't need a nanny," Precious said to herself. "They need someone who understands." She spent the rest of the night writing an application that was completely different from any resume she had ever sent. On June 16, 2024, Phillips sat in his home office, dreading the interviews he had scheduled. The house was unusually quiet because the boys were at school, but Phillips knew that peace wouldn't last long. Joy had arranged meetings with 5 potential nannies, and Phillips wasn't optimistic about any of them. Most people took one look at his son's reputation and ran in the opposite direction. The first candidate arrived at exactly 9 a.m. She was a stern-looking woman in her 50s who had worked for several wealthy families. "Mr. James," she said crisply, "I understand your children have behavioral issues. I believe in strict discipline and firm boundaries. I've never met a child I couldn't control." Phillips felt immediately uncomfortable. His sons didn't need to be controlled. They needed to be healed. The second candidate was a young woman fresh out of college who seemed bright and enthusiastic. But Phillips could tell she had no idea what she was getting into. "I just love children," she gushed. "I'm sure once the boys see how fun I am, they'll forget all about being sad." Phillips thanked her politely and moved on to the next interview. The third and fourth candidates were similar, either too strict or too naive to handle 3 traumatized children. Then Precious arrived. Phillips opened the front door to find a woman in her late 20s with warm brown eyes and a gentle smile. She was wearing a simple but professional dress, and she carried herself with quiet confidence. "Mr. James, I'm Precious Fred. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me." As they walked to his office, Phillips noticed that Precious wasn't looking around the mansion with the wide-eyed amazement that most people showed. She seemed more interested in the family photos on the walls than the expensive artwork. "Tell me about yourself, Miss Fred," Phillips said as they sat down. Precious took a deep breath. "Mr. James, I don't have a college degree in child development. I don't have certificates in early childhood education. What I have is 7 years of experience working with children and a childhood that taught me what it feels like when your world falls apart." Phillips was surprised by her honesty. "What do you mean?" "My parents died when I was 8. I spent the rest of my childhood in foster care, moving from family to family. I know what it's like to be scared that everyone you care about will leave you. I know what it's like to push people away because it hurts less than being abandoned. Precious leaned forward slightly. Mr. James, I've read about your family's loss, and my heart breaks for what you and your sons are going through. Your boys aren't bad children. They're grieving children. And grief in children often looks like anger and defiance. Phillips felt something he hadn't felt in months. The previous nannies all said my sons were impossible to manage, Phillips said. That's because they were trying to manage them instead of trying to understand them, Precious said gently. Your sons aren't trying to be difficult, Mr. James. They're trying to survive. For the first time since Gloria's death, Phillips felt like someone truly understood what his family was going through. Miss Fred, I have to warn you. My sons have driven away 16 nannies in 5 months. They can be destructive. Precious smiled. Mr. James, I've worked with children who set their foster homes on fire because they were afraid of being hurt again. I've worked with kids who broke everything they touched because they felt broken inside. Destruction is just pain with nowhere else to go. Phillips stared at this remarkable woman who seemed to see his sons as human beings instead of problems to be solved. When can you start? He asked. On June 17, 2024, Precious arrived at the James mansion at 7 a.m., carrying a thermos of coffee and a bag of homemade cookies. She knew that first impressions mattered, especially with children who had been hurt. Phillips met her at the door, looking exhausted and stressed. The boys are still asleep, but they'll be up soon. Are you sure you're ready for this? Precious handed him the thermos. Thought you might need some coffee. And Mr. James, I want you to know that whatever happens today, I'm not giving up on your sons. Phillips was touched by the simple gesture. When was the last time someone had thought to bring him coffee? Thank you, Miss Fred. That's very kind. Please call me Precious. At exactly 7:30 a.m., the sound of running feet echoed through the house, followed by shouting and the crash of something breaking. They're up, Phillips said with a grimace. Precious followed the noise to the kitchen, where she found 3 identical boys with dark hair and bright blue eyes engaged in what looked like a syrup war. The kitchen island was covered in a sticky mess, and one of the boys was standing on a chair, preparing to dump an entire bottle of orange juice on his brothers. Food fight, yelled one of the boys when he saw Precious in the doorway. Instead of getting angry or trying to stop them, Precious did something unexpected. She laughed. Wow, she said, walking calmly into the chaos. You guys are really good at making messes. I'm impressed. The boys stopped mid-fight, confused by her reaction. You're not going to yell at us? Asked one of them. Why would I yell? This looks like it was actually pretty fun, though I bet you're all sticky now. The boys exchanged glances, clearly thrown off by Precious' calm response. I'm Precious, she continued, sitting down at the kitchen table as if sticky floors and food-covered children were perfectly normal. And I brought cookies, but I guess you're probably too full from eating all that syrup to want any. We weren't eating it, one boy said defensively. We were throwing it. Ah, I see. Much more fun than eating it, I bet. What are your names? The oldest boy, who seemed to be the leader, crossed his arms suspiciously. I'm Tommy. That's Dan. And that's Ben. And we don't like nannies. That's okay, Precious said cheerfully. I'm not really a nanny anyway. What are you then? Dan asked, curious despite himself. I'm a friend who happens to know how to make really good cookies and tell awesome bedtime stories. Ben, the youngest, perked up. What kind of stories? All kinds. Stories about brave knights, magical animals, and kids who go on amazing adventures. The boys were clearly interested, but Tommy wasn't ready to let his guard down. We don't want friends, he said firmly. Friends leave. Precious' heart ached at the pain in his voice. You're right, Tommy. Sometimes friends do leave. Sometimes people we love leave, even when they don't want to. The boys went quiet, and Precious could see tears forming in their eyes. But you know what I learned? Precious continued gently. Just because someone leaves doesn't mean they didn't love you, and it doesn't mean that everyone else will leave too. Our mama left, Ben whispered, his voice breaking. I know, sweetheart. And I bet that hurts so much that sometimes you feel like your chest is going to break open. All three boys nodded, tears now flowing freely. "Can I tell you a secret?" Precious asked softly. They nodded again. "I lost my mama and daddy when I was just a little older than you, and for a long time, I was so angry and scared that I tried to push everyone away. I thought if I was mean enough, people would leave before I could get attached to them." The boys stared at her with wide eyes. "Did it work?" Tommy asked quietly. "For a while, but I was so lonely, and I missed out on knowing some really wonderful people because I was too scared to let them care about me." Precious reached into her bag and pulled out the cookies. "These are chocolate chip. They were my mama's favorite. I make them when I miss her." She placed the bag on the table. "You don't have to eat them if you don't want to. And you don't have to like me if you don't want to. But I'm going to be here every day, whether you're good or bad, happy or sad, because that's what people who care about you do. They stick around." The kitchen was silent except for the sound of the boys sniffling. Then Ben, the youngest, took a tentative step toward the table. "Can I try a cookie?" he asked shyly. "Of course, sweetheart." Ben took a bite and his eyes lit up. "It's really good." Dan and Tommy exchanged glances and slowly approached the table. As the three boys ate cookies and began to relax around Precious, Phillips watched from the doorway in amazement. In 20 minutes, this woman had accomplished what 16 previous nannies couldn't do in months. She had reached his sons. But Phillips had no idea that their peaceful morning was about to be shattered by news that would threaten to tear their fragile new beginning apart. Phillips' phone rang just as the boys were finishing their cookies, and his face went pale when he saw the caller ID. It was his lawyer, Mark, and he only called when there was serious trouble. "Phillips, we have a problem," Mark said without any greeting. "C News is running a story tonight about your family. Someone leaked information about the nannies quitting, and they're painting you as a negligent father who can't control his children." Phillips felt his stomach drop. "What exactly are they saying?" The headline is, "Billionaire's Demon Children Drive Away 16 Nannies. Are the James triplets out of control?" They have interviews with 3 former nannies who are calling the boys dangerous and emotionally disturbed. Through the kitchen doorway, Phillips could see Precious sitting with his sons, all of them laughing as Ben told her a silly joke. For the first time in months, his children looked happy and peaceful. "Mark, can we stop this story from airing?" "I'm trying, but it's going to be difficult." "Phillips, there's something else. They specifically mentioned that you just hired a new nanny yesterday. They're probably going to target her next." Phillips' blood ran cold. If the media destroyed Precious' reputation like they had destroyed his family's privacy, she might leave just like all the others, and his sons would be heartbroken all over again. "I have to warn her," Phillips said, ending the call. But when he walked back into the kitchen, he found a scene that made him stop in his tracks. Precious was sitting on the floor with all 3 boys, and they were building something together with blocks. The boys were actually cooperating, taking turns, and helping each other. "Look, Daddy," Ben called out excitedly. "We're building a castle for Mama. Precious says Mama can see us from heaven, so we want to make something beautiful for her." Phillips felt tears in his eyes. His sons hadn't mentioned their mother in a positive way since she died. They had been too angry and hurt to remember the good times. "It's beautiful, boys," Phillips said, his voice thick with emotion. But then Tommy looked up at his father with worried eyes. "Daddy, you look sad. Is Precious going to leave like all the others?" Phillips looked at Precious, who was watching him with concern. He knew he had to tell her about the news story, but he was terrified that she would run away to protect herself. "Boys," Precious said gently, "why don't you keep working on the castle while I talk to your dad for a minute?" Phillips and Precious stepped into the living room, and Phillips took a deep breath. "Precious, there's something I need to tell you. The local news is running a story tonight about my family. They're going to make my sons look like monsters, and they'll probably come after you next." Precious listened quietly as Phillips explained about the media attention and the damage it could do to her reputation. "I understand if you want to leave," Phillips said sadly. "I won't blame you for protecting yourself, but I want you to know that in one day you've done more for my boys than anyone has been able to do in 5 months. Precious was quiet for a long moment, thinking. "Mr. James, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you believe your sons are monsters?" Phillips was shocked by the question. Of course not. They're grieving children who miss their mother. Then why does it matter what strangers on TV say about them? Phillips stared at her. Because it will affect their futures, their school, their friendships, their opportunities. Or, Precious said gently, it will show them that the people who really love them will stand by them no matter what the world says. She walked to the window and looked out at the garden where Gloria used to play with the boys. Mr. James, I've been judged my whole life. Foster kid, no parents, no fancy education. People looked at me and decided I wasn't worth much. But a few people saw past all that and believed in me anyway. Those are the people who changed my life. Precious turned back to Phillips. Your sons need to know that they're worth fighting for. If I run away the first time things get difficult, what does that teach them about their own worth? Phillips felt his heart swell with admiration for this incredible woman. So, you're staying? I'm staying, but I have one condition. Anything. When that news story airs tonight, we watch it together as a family, all of us, and we talk about it honestly. Phillips nodded, though he was worried about how the boys would react to seeing themselves portrayed as problem children on television. The rest of the day was magical in a way the James house hadn't experienced since Gloria's death. Precious seemed to have an intuitive understanding of what each boy needed. When Dan had a meltdown because he couldn't find his favorite toy, Precious didn't try to distract him or tell him to stop crying. Instead, she sat with him and let him cry, rubbing his back and telling him it was okay to feel frustrated. When Ben got scared during their afternoon walk because a loud truck reminded him of the accident that killed his mother, Precious picked him up and held him while he trembled, singing softly until he felt safe again. And when Tommy tested her by deliberately spilling paint on her dress, Precious just smiled and said, "Looks like we're both artists now. Should we paint something together?" By evening, the boys were following Precious around like devoted puppies. They helped her make dinner, set the table, and even cleaned up their toys without being asked. Phillips watched in amazement as his sons transformed before his eyes. They were still the same children, but the anger and fear that had consumed them for months was beginning to fade. "Precious," Tommy said as they finished dinner, "will you read us a bedtime story tonight?" "Of course, sweetheart. What kind of story would you like?" "A story about a mama who goes to heaven but still loves her little boys," Ben said quietly. Precious' eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. "I know the perfect story for that." At 8 p.m., the whole family gathered in the living room to watch the news. Phillips held his breath as the story began. Tonight at 8, billionaire Phillips James' out-of-control children have driven away 16 nannies in just 5 months. Former employees described the James triplets as dangerous, emotionally disturbed, and impossible to manage. We'll speak with 3 former nannies who say working for the James family was a nightmare. The boys watched in confusion as their pictures appeared on screen with words like problem children and behavioral issues flashing across the bottom. "Daddy," Dan whispered, "why are they saying mean things about us?" The first former nanny appeared on screen. "Those children are completely out of control," she said. "They destroyed property, refused to follow rules, and seemed to take pleasure in making adults miserable. I've never encountered such difficult children." Tommy's face crumpled. "Are we really that bad, Daddy?" Before Phillips could answer, Precious spoke up. "Boys, do you know what I see when I look at you?" The triplets shook their heads. "I see 3 brave little boys who love their mama so much that they're willing to fight the whole world to protect her memory. I see children who are smart enough to test new people to make sure they're safe to trust. And I see kids who have big hearts that are just waiting for the right person to help them heal." On the TV, the second nanny was speaking. "The father is never around, so these children have no discipline or structure. They need professional help, not another nanny." Phillips felt his anger rising, but Precious remained calm. "That lady doesn't know what she's talking about," Ben said indignantly. "Daddy loves us." "You're absolutely right," Precious agreed. "Your daddy loves you so much that he's been working extra hard to take care of you all by himself. And that's not easy when your heart is broken too." The third nanny appeared on screen, and her words were the cruelest yet. "Those children are damaged beyond repair. No amount of love or patience will fix what's wrong with them. The James family needs to face the fact that these boys may never be normal. Tommy started crying. She thinks we're broken forever. Precious immediately moved to the couch and pulled all 3 boys into her arms. Listen to me, sweet boys. That woman is completely wrong. You are not broken. You are not damaged. You are hurting. And that's completely different. She looked each boy in the eyes as she spoke. Grief isn't something that needs to be fixed. It's something that needs to be honored. You're not supposed to be normal right now. You're supposed to miss your mama and feel sad and scared. That's how love works. But the lady said no one can help us, Dan sobbed. The lady never met me, Precious said with a smile. And she certainly never met 3 boys as special and strong as you. Phillips watched in awe as Precious turned what could have been a devastating moment into an opportunity for healing. On June 18, 2024, Phillips' phone was ringing nonstop. The news story had gone viral, and public opinion was split between people who felt sorry for the boys and people who thought they were spoiled brats who needed discipline. Phillips' business partners were calling, worried about how the negative publicity would affect their companies. The boys' school called to schedule a meeting about addressing the behavioral concerns raised in the media, but the worst call came from Child Protective Services. Mr. James, we've received several complaints about your children following last night's news story. We need to schedule a home visit to assess the situation. Phillips felt like his world was falling apart again. If CPS decided his sons were out of control, they could recommend removing them from his home. When he hung up, he found Precious in the kitchen making breakfast with the boys. They were all wearing aprons and giggling as they flipped pancakes. Bad news? Precious asked, seeing his expression. CPS wants to do a home visit. People are calling my sons dangerous based on a one-sided news story. The boys stopped laughing and looked scared. Are they going to take us away, Daddy? Ben asked in a tiny voice. Phillips knelt down and pulled his sons close. I will never let anyone take you away from me. Never. But privately, Phillips was terrified. What if the social worker believed the media narrative? What if they decided the boys were better off in foster care? Mr. James, Precious said quietly, may I make a suggestion, please? What if we invited the social worker to spend a whole day with us? Not just an hour-long visit, but a real day where they can see what your boys are actually like. Do you think that would work? Precious smiled. I think anyone who spends real time with Tommy, Dan, and Ben will see what I see. 3 amazing kids who just need love and patience. On June 21, 2024, Mrs. Parker from Child Protective Services arrived for her visit. She was a stern-looking woman in her 50s who clearly expected to find chaos and dysfunction. Instead, she found 3 boys helping Precious make cookies for their father's office staff. Good morning, Mrs. Parker, Precious said warmly. The boys are excited to show you their morning routine. Mrs. Parker looked skeptical as she watched Tommy carefully measure flour while his brothers took turns stirring the bowl. We're making cookies for Daddy's workers, Ben explained proudly. Precious taught us that when people work hard, they deserve something sweet, and we're going to deliver them ourselves. Dan added, we want to say thank you for helping Daddy build his buildings. Mrs. Parker raised an eyebrow. These are the same children who were described as uncontrollable on the news? Mrs. Parker, Precious said gently, would you like to hear the boys' side of the story? For the next hour, Precious helped the boys explain their feelings about their mother's death, their fear of new people leaving them, and their confusion about why so many nannies had given up on them. We weren't trying to be bad, Tommy said earnestly. We were just scared that if we liked someone, they would go away like Mama did. But Precious taught us that it's okay to be sad and scared, Dan added. She doesn't try to make us forget Mama. She helps us remember the good things about her. Mrs. Parker spent the entire day with the family, observing their interactions, their routines, and their genuine affection for each other. At dinner, she watched Phillips patiently help Ben cut his food while listening to Dan's story about his day at school. She saw Precious teach Tommy how to fold napkins while they talked about his worries and dreams. Mr. James, Mrs. Parker said before leaving, I've been doing this job for 22 years, and I've rarely seen a family working so hard to heal together. Your boys aren't problems to be solved. They're children who are learning to trust again. She looked at Precious with respect. "Miss Fred, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. These children are lucky to have you." 5 months later, by November 21, 2024, the James family had become completely transformed. The boys were thriving in school, had made new friends, and rarely had behavioral issues. More importantly, they had learned to talk about their mother with love instead of just pain. Phillips had also changed. He had learned to balance work and family and had discovered that being present for his sons was more important than any business deal. But the biggest change was how much Phillips had come to love and depend on Precious. She wasn't just a nanny anymore. She was the heart of their family. On November 22, 2024, after the boys were asleep, Phillips found Precious in the garden where Gloria used to play with the children. "Precious," he said, sitting beside her on the bench, "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "When Gloria died, I thought my family was broken forever. I thought my sons would never be happy again, and I thought I would never feel whole again." Precious listened quietly, her hand finding his. "But you didn't just save my boys," Phillips continued. "You saved me too. You taught me how to be a better father, a better man, and a better person." Phillips got down on one knee and pulled out a ring box. "Precious Fred, I love you. My sons love you, and I can't imagine our lives without you." Precious gasped, tears streaming down her face. "Will you marry me? Will you officially become part of our family?" "Yes," Precious cried, throwing her arms around Philip's neck. "Yes, yes, yes." The wedding was held on December 10, 2024, in the same garden where Phillips had proposed, with Tommy, Dan, and Ben serving as ring bearers. They had insisted on wearing matching tuxedos and had spent weeks practicing their walk down the aisle. During the ceremony, Phillips and Precious exchanged vows that they had written specifically for their unique family situation. "Precious," Phillips said, "you didn't just agree to marry me. You agreed to love 3 broken-hearted little boys and help them become whole again. You are the answer to prayers I didn't even know how to pray." "Phillips," Precious replied, "you and the boys taught me that family isn't just about blood. It's about choice. You chose to trust me with your most precious treasures, and I choose to love and protect all of you for the rest of my life." But the most touching moment came when the boys stepped forward with their own vows for Precious. "Precious," Tommy said, speaking for all 3 of them, "we promise to be good boys for you. We promise to remember that Mama loved us and you love us too. And we promise to help you take care of Daddy because sometimes he forgets to eat lunch." Everyone in the garden was crying and laughing at the same time. 2 years later, on December 15, 2026, Phillips and Precious welcomed a daughter, Emily James. The boys were over the moon about their baby sister and took their roles as big brothers very seriously. "She's so tiny," Ben marveled, gently touching Emily's hand. "We have to protect her and teach her everything," Dan declared. "Just like Precious protected and taught us," Tommy added wisely. 5 years after Precious first walked into the James mansion, by June 17, 2029, the family was unrecognizable from the broken, grieving people they had once been. The boys, now 11 years old, were honor students who were known at school for their kindness and empathy. They often helped younger children who were struggling, using the emotional wisdom that Precious had taught them. Phillips had expanded his business to include a foundation that provided support for single parents and grieving families. He had learned that his greatest success wasn't measured in dollars, but in the love and stability he provided for his family. Precious had started a consulting business helping other families who were struggling with loss and behavioral challenges. She had written a book about healing grief in children that had become a bestseller. And little Emily was growing up surrounded by more love than any child could ask for, with 3 big brothers who adored her and parents who had learned that the strongest families are often the ones that have been broken and rebuilt with love. On the anniversary of Gloria's death each year, on January 12th, the family would visit her grave together. But instead of a sad occasion, it had become a celebration of how love continues even after loss. "Mama," the boys would say, "we want you to meet Precious and Emily. We think you would really like them. And Daddy smiles again now, so you don't have to worry about us anymore." The media that had once portrayed the James triplets as demon children now held them up as an example of resilience and healing. But Phillips and Precious didn't care about public opinion anymore. They had learned that the only opinions that mattered were the ones that came from people who truly knew and loved their family. As Precious tucked the boys into bed one night, Tommy looked up at her with the same trust and love that had taken months to develop. "Precious," he said, "I'm glad you didn't give up on us like all the other nannies did." "I could never give up on you, sweetheart," Precious replied. "You three taught me what I was really meant to do with my life." "What's that?" "Love you forever." And that's exactly what she did. The story of the Billionaire's impossible triplets had become the story of how broken hearts can heal when they're given patience, understanding, and unconditional love. Precious hadn't just survived working with the James boys. She had given them back their childhood, their father his purpose, and herself a family worth fighting for. Sometimes the most difficult children are the ones who need love the most. And sometimes the people who seem least qualified on paper are exactly the people who can work miracles with their hearts.